that we may apply to our positions. I ask for your protection of our first responders and the men and women of the military. And may you give strength and wisdom to our local, state, and national governments so that the citizens' needs may be heard and met. We pray in your name. Amen. All right, Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag. Oh, I'm the only person that's not muted. Indivisible, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, I need a motion to convene into closed session under section 2.2-3711A8 of the Code of Virginia to consult with legal counsel regarding Freedom of Information Act training. Do I have a second?
Second. So moved.
And all right, so we have no other people that are joining us. So motion passes. All in favor? Sorry.
Aye.
All right, so
Aye.
Since we don't have anybody else that's with us this evening, Krista, can you just go ahead and move us into the closed session?
We can stay right here where we're at, and if anyone else comes in, I will not allow them to come in.
All right, so you just
So we're
lock it
good to
until later
proceed.
on.
Correct,
Okay,
yes.
that'd be good.
And anyone listening on the phone isn't able to hear, Krista?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't see anybody but us.
Okay. And I do have a couple of slides that I'm going to put up while I'm presenting if you want to enable.
You should be allowed to share screen already.
Well, let me try doing that here.
Perfect.
Can you all see my screen?
Yep.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, thank you all for taking the time to be with me this evening. I know that many of you have already attended the VML training, which is very comprehensive and covers all of the basics of FOIA. And I looked at that and I wanted to take this opportunity to hone in on a few nuances that are a little more particular to the town of Dayton. So there are going to be lots of things that were touched on in the VML training that I'm not going to.
Deputy Commissioner of the Virginia Department of Taxation, Deputy City Manager of Lynchburg, and as the Town Manager of Ashland, Middleburg, and Gate City. Welcome.
Thank you for having me, folks. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
All right, great. Well, if Krista will allow me to share the screen, I'll go into my presentation this evening. Obviously, I would love to be there in person to visit you all, but obviously we have the circumstances we have. So I'll do my best to answer any questions you have as we go through. As the mayor said, I'll try to take some time at the end to make sure I answer all your questions. And if there's anything else we can do, I'll be happy to do that as well. So.
You should be able to share your screen.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, can you folks see my slide deck?
No, sir.
Now we can.
Excellent. All right, well, thank you again for having me this evening. And again, please feel free to stop and ask questions as we go through. I'm going to cover a few topics. First, I'll start out with a little bit about the Virginia Institute of Government and also the Weldon Cooper Center for Public Service. And then I'll talk a little bit about the council manager form of government, some peculiarities of Virginia local government in general. And then if there's time at the end, and if council so desires, I'll discuss a survey that we did last year of communities, small towns and cities in Virginia regarding council committees, the format that other communities have used. I understand that's a topic maybe of interest to council here in Dayton. So again, thank you for having me. So you've already, the mayor was kind enough to introduce me. Obviously, if you have any further questions or things you'd like to look into, please go to our website. So we recently completed the strategic plan for Weldon Cooper Center for Public Service, which we're a part of, and put up our vision and mission statement. So our vision is resilient Virginia communities shaped by the people who live there. A little bit about the Weldon Cooper Center for Public Service, UVA. We have several business units that are part of the Cooper Center. The Virginia Institute of Government is one of them. Some of the things that the Cooper Center does that a lot of you and other people in your community may be familiar with is the Demographics Research Group. They put together all the census data and the American Community Survey data for all 50 states and the District of Columbia, but also all of the towns, cities, and counties in the Commonwealth. And also you may be familiar with the Sorensen Institute for Political Leadership, which is a great program for folks who are considering running for office at the local, state, or federal level. The Institute of Government was created in 1994 by the General Assembly. A coalition of local government leaders from throughout the Commonwealth got together and were able to get the General Assembly to fund the creation of the Institute. Larry Terry is our executive director of the Cooper Center. He's been there a little over 2 years. And due to the way the legislation is written, he actually serves as the director of the Institute. The associate director manages the daily operations. Out of the 324 towns, cities, and counties in the Commonwealth, 190 are active members of the Institute of Government, and membership dues are based on the population of the locality. This is the goal.
Charles, can I interrupt and say you're still on the first slide? Did you know that?
I did not.
It's the cover slide. Yeah. At least on my screen you are. You might want to start the slideshow or.
I already did on mine. Let's see. I apologize.
There you go. It's showing up now. Good. Thank you.
Oh, excellent. Thank you, Angela. All right. My apologies, Council. So the goal of VIG is to serve as a central navigator for Virginia communities and building governance capacity and developing dynamic leaders at all levels. And I'll talk a little bit about how we do that and how we've done that historically. The core functions of the Institute where we serve Virginia local governments in particular are professional and technical support. For example, we work with all of the town, city, and county administrators and managers, their deputies, and other leadership folks on professional and technical support for the communities. That includes a technical assistance listserv, which your town manager participates in. And so basically, local government staff leaders are able to get best practices from throughout the Commonwealth fairly quickly and get answers to their questions. We also house several leadership development and professional development programs for local government leaders, not only here in Virginia, but throughout the country. The Senior Executive Institute and the LEAD programs are for local government leaders from all over. We occasionally have people from other countries come as well. And then another thing you may be familiar with, we provide the Constitutional Officer Education Program for all the city and county treasurers and commissioners of revenue. So we work with all of those folks, for example, in Rockingham County and other localities to facilitate all of their professional development needs as well. We partner closely with the Virginia Municipal League, which I know some of you who are new to office have the chance to, I think, participate in their newly elected officials conference recently. So some of the things I may talk about this evening could be familiar to you, may have seen before. And for those you haven't, hopefully it's something helpful. Just some basic overviews of local government in general United States. A little bit about local government authority. Obviously, the Code of Virginia, Section 15.2 has pretty much all of the information you'll need to look at as you're trying to understand the powers and authorities of local governments. And obviously, cities, towns, and counties have charters from the General Assembly, which have given the authority to manage their day-to-day affairs. Some of you may be familiar with the Dillon Rule from your Virginia Municipal League training. Obviously, in Virginia, we're a Dillon Rule state, so the authority that localities have is derived again from the authority given to them by the General Assembly through the Code of Virginia and the Charter. A lot of other states have home rule, which allows more flexibility, but there's pitfalls and pros and cons to both forms. Some other unusual features about Virginia local government, as you all know, city and county separation, fewer units of local government, very few cities, no independent school divisions, and just a greater reluctance to extend taxing powers to special purpose entities like you would see in other states like fire districts and school districts. A couple different forms of government. Obviously, you guys function under the council manager. There's also a mayor council form that some of the smaller localities in the state use, but don't have a town manager or a day-to-day administrator. And then obviously, International City County Management Association provides a code of ethics for chief administrative officers to follow. And again, some of you guys who are longer time members of your council are clearly aware of this, and you may have seen this again in the VML training recently, but I'll go through it briefly. The council manager form of government takes you all, the elected officials, and then who are leaders of a community, and pairs you with a professional manager to help run the day-to-day operations. Obviously, all the power and authority to set policy rests with you, the town council. And then obviously you turn to a professional nonpartisan manager to run the day-to-day operations of your organization. A lot of folks, I think, struggle that aren't involved in local government on the difference between, let's say, a mayor and a city and town manager or a county administrator. I think that's a question I got as a town manager for several years in Virginia. What's the difference between you and a mayor? Obviously, previously talking about leading the council, and then the ceremonial duties that go along with that, along with actually leading the meetings, and then the manager, again, administering the day-to-day operations of the community and working with the department heads. That being said, every community is different. Everything contributes to how each community decides to manage itself. So population, size of staff, and the unique geographic and other business type of conditions in that locality contribute to that. And again, the town manager or the CAO works at the pleasure of the elected body. There are several responsibilities that are delineated in the Code of Virginia in section 15.2, which I mentioned before. And I'll just show you the list of these. I won't read through these, but obviously these are the baseline functions of town and city managers and county administrators. So the chief administrative officer, or in your all's case, the town manager, is really a facilitator of the policy and ideas of the council and the community. Obviously, it's your job as a town council to broadly come together and produce a vision for your community, a strategic plan, a comprehensive plan by law from a land use standpoint. And then it's responsibility of the CAO to implement and communicate that vision to the community. And that's ultimately the gap between politics and administration, and understanding that role of the town manager or the CAO. I'll talk a little bit about the aspects of this, and again, with my experience in working for elected bodies for over 20 years, the challenge is always finding, again, what's politically acceptable versus administratively sustainable. And then you have to look at the values of the community, the values of your organization, and the things that you'd like to accomplish. And that's really where it comes down to the relationship between the council and the manager have to be very strong, very transparent, very open for things to be successful. And these are a few of the values in my experience and in other communities that folks sort of always trying to balance, whether you're an elected official or a staff member. When you're dealing with citizens, business owners, and other members of the community. And again, the two roles of political acceptability So as you all, the elected officials, to accept a specific program, policy, or project, and then the town manager and the staff's role to actually efficiently maintain that for the long term, make sure that it's budgeted for and has the staffing to take care of whatever that program, policy, or project is. So really the summary of that portion of this is bridging that gap between you, the town council, and the town manager and staff is absolutely critical to good government, to efficient, effective government and getting things done. As you all know, a lot of the things that happen and come before town councils and other elected bodies and leadership in communities, our stories matter. People have to see, why are we doing this? Why are we investing in this? Whether it be an infrastructure project or a policy that's going to affect everyone in the community. And that goes back to making sure that we don't ignore the values. And sometimes democracy is messy, even at the town council level. And that's okay. You have to have decisions and discussions about what's best for the community. And I think that's where we try to understand that delineation between the gap of administration and politics. I'll touch on a couple of things that, as you guys are very well aware, the challenges that are continuing for local governments all across the country, whether it be Dayton or Richmond or Roanoke or any other community here in Virginia and beyond. Being asked to do more with less. Federal and state support is declining overall. Obviously, we've seen some uptick because of CARES Act funding, but honestly, the federal government has not given localities the money that they've been asking for the last several months to try to roll out new policies and programs related to the pandemic and other economic issues. Citizens are demanding a more caring, responsive government. I think we've seen a lot of activity in the last year, whether it be protests in the streets, interactions with local government officials. Everything is online, everything is live streamed. So governments have to be understanding of that and very, very responsive to that, and finding new ways to work with different sectors of the community. And again, based on that, new technology is changing communication and service deployment. Just look at all the ways that you as a community are having to take care of the services for your community because of COVID-19. A lot of communities have invested in new technology over the last few months to try to better serve our community. We're using a platform tonight that we would never have thought about 18 months ago as a way to hold a town council meeting. So I'll stop there just from the standpoint of asking or answering any questions, or if there's any discussion that council wants to have in general about the council manager form of government, or just policy versus administration. And then if it's council's pleasure after that, I'll be happy to briefly talk about what some of your peer communities are doing with standing council committees. So I defer to you, Mayor.
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Hartgrove? I'd like to just address a couple things that we've had. Certainly not unique to Dayton. I'm sure this happens with every council, but our first meeting this year, we had some items that were brought up by a council member that were read out loud in the council meeting, but all of which, had they called the staff to clarify, would not have been an issue. It kind of makes council look silly when we're bringing things up in the public which aren't accurate. We had another situation this past Friday where Ms. Lawrence sent out a update of things that happened last week. And then we get a phone call today regarding those, which hadn't been put out to anybody but council. And some of those things were put out in the community, again, inaccurate. So we need to work together and not against each other to try to make our citizens think that we know what we're doing. Because if we continue to spread false information, it just makes us look silly as a body.
Well, Mr. Mayor, from my experience, I'll share with you and the council this. One of the best ways to make sure that the town runs smoothly from a policy standpoint that you guys are in charge of as the town council, the leaders of the community, and then from the town manager standpoint and the staff, is making sure that there's transparency and honesty in communications and expectations. And to your point, one of the things as a former town manager that my staff and I never really appreciated was being surprised in a town council meeting by a very difficult question. There's a time and a place, in my opinion, in my experience, to have those conversations. The town manager absolutely answers to the town council as a whole. That is where they serve at the pleasure of. That being said, I think whether it be a personnel issue or just a challenging question, those things can be discussed in private, and then they can be discussed in public once council has had a chance to fully vet an issue and talk about it. I think anytime staff feels like they've been caught off guard publicly in a meeting is never a good thing. And again, to your point, it doesn't make the town or the community look like everyone's on the same team and trying to understand what the goals of the council are. I couldn't hear you, Mayor.
I would love to hear what other council committees are doing in other municipalities.
Sure. Absolutely. So I originally put this together to some of your colleagues in the town of Warrenton, Virginia, and Fauquier County. They had asked for this last year because they were having some similar discussions about, how to efficiently move ideas and policy through council. They had been doing committees, but had found at times that was not totally efficient. Also, the challenges of a lot of meetings, everyone trying to balance for responsibilities, as we all know, as someone like me who's worked for folks like you in the past. You guys have a lot of responsibilities. You have a lot of meetings, not only the ones for the town, but things you go to for the region, Chamber of Commerce, all sorts of other entities that you want to participate in. So really the goal here was to try to find some efficient solutions for them to consider. So I'll provide you the same information. We did a survey at the Institute of Government last year of Virginia local governments. We limited it to towns and cities of less than 20,000 population because we wanted to make sure we were touching on the smaller communities. And these are the questions that we asked. Do you have standing committees? If so, what are they? How many council members serve on the committee? How many members are on your council? Is there a process or a policy to determine what issues go to committee versus a council of the whole? And how often do they meet? And so here's the communities that responded and gave us some helpful answers. The town of Alta Vista down in Southside Virginia has no standing committees, and they use a work session as a way for them to work as a council as a whole on issues they need to talk more about outside of a regular business meeting. The town of Amherst, right outside of Lynchburg in Amherst County, they have 4 standing committees, 2 council members per committee, no policy, and they meet as needed. The town of Ashland, where I spent over 13 years as a town manager, they do not have any standing committees. They hold work sessions before each council meeting every month. They have 2 regular business meetings. They typically have work sessions before those. Then they have a separately appointed Parks and Rec committee that has 1 elected official that serves as liaison from the town council. And they also have town council members who serve as liaison to other external organizations, whether it be business groups, representations to regional authorities and things of that nature. The town of Clarksville, down in Southern Virginia, has several committees. They do limit it, like Amherst, to 2 council members per committee. They typically only try to bring the bigger issues that need to be vetted further by a committee before they go on to the full town council. The town of Culpeper has several committees. They have 4 members on each of these committees, and then they have 9 total council members. As it says here, the interaction committee meets quarterly, other committees meet monthly. Your town manager responded to this as well. So want to make sure that that's there. Obviously, this is your all's current status. The town of Middleburg and Loudoun County has personnel and a public safety/police standing committee. They are committees of the whole. The mayor does appoint a member to serve as a liaison. The town of Pulaski, a little bit further down from you guys, in the New River Valley on 81, suspended its committees in favor of work sessions. Similar to the town of Ashland, where council acts as the committee of the whole, they found that having a work session eliminated an almost endless succession of committee meetings that were held monthly. The town of Rocky Mount, they have 5 committees, obviously with a chair, vice chair, and a voting member. They have 7 total council members. Mayor council may refer an item. Typically, they meet 3 times annually and have no regular meetings. And they obviously make recommendations to the council as a whole.
Just to clarify, since the chief is on the call and texted me, when it said town of Dayton, it didn't have the public safety committee because that's a newer committee. But we have even more committees than you had on there. But sorry, Justin, it was done. This survey was done last year.
My apologies. Yeah, this survey was probably done in January of 2020. Town of South Boston and Southern Virginia as well. They have two committees for finance and current issues. But as you can see by the 3rd bullet point, they're basically committees of the whole. The entire council is there during both committee meetings, but they are split up into the membership. The city of Williamsburg was the only city to respond, but they have no standing committees. But again, like a lot of the other communities, they have individual council liaisons for external organizations, whether it be to the school board or other county or regional authorities. And I'm happy to put the council committee structure portion of this in a brief report and send to your town manager if you guys would like to have that. That way you can refer to that if you make any decisions on this topic in the future. Again, these are the sort of the goals that we found that the other communities looked at when they were trying to figure out a committee structure, but worked for them. So I'll just let you read through those. With that, Mr. Mayor and members of Town Council, I'm really enjoyed my time with you, but I'm most happy to spend as much time as you need to answer questions, or if you have anything you'd like me to look into and get back to you on, I'm happy to do that as well.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Hartgrove?
I'm not a council member.
You can talk.
I wondered if you could talk a little bit more about the level of detail and getting in the weeds for council versus staff. So I do a now weekly update for council members and as well as my monthly report. Where's the balance on how much information they need in terms of administrative stuff versus just keeping them informed in case the public asks them a question?
Well, my personal goal for when I worked for elected bodies, when I worked for town councils, was to make sure that they had all the information to where they weren't blindsided when they were out in the community on any major issues. So the last thing I wanted to do is have a town council member be at the grocery store or church or some other public event, and they have to find out about something third hand that's happened in the community. So that was always my #1 goal, to make sure the council had information along those lines. That being said, when it comes to issues that involve the day-to-day operations, managing and directing staff, I always felt that that was my prerogative as a town manager to make those decisions and to have authority over that. And now, if council had a concern or a question about the operations of one of the departments or the department head or some of the staff, I always encourage them to come to me, and I would talk about that openly with them, on a one-on-one basis or in groups of 2 or less, obviously to make sure we're compliant with FOIA. I found what was helpful for me was having fairly regular one-on-one meetings with town council members, or 2 or less, along with, like you said, Angela, maybe like a weekly report, just sort of give the high level of events. Scheduling some time in groups of 2 or less, or individually with elected officials, I think is a good way to, number one, build a positive relationship. It builds openness, it builds transparency, and it builds a level of trust, that you need to have. And the relationship between a council and a manager is an extraordinarily important one, and it's a very special one. It's very challenging to have multiple bosses, and it's also challenging for council to have all that authority and all the need to be responsible and answer to the citizens of the community, but not be able to actually say, hey, let's go dig this ditch, let's go pave this road. It's a fine balance of micromanagement and policy and day to day. So again, my thought is make sure that there's a clear line. And one of the ways to do that is having an open, honest discussion between a manager or council about expectations on those things. And that also goes back to another thing that a lot of communities, just because they get busy and a lot of elected bodies don't do religiously, is make sure that you are, evaluating and sitting down with your town manager at least once a year and doing an evaluation. And honestly, you really should be evaluating them more than once a year, maybe officially and in a document, but quite frankly, it should be a quarterly discussion. How are things going? That way there's no surprises for the manager, because the last thing I would want as a manager is to go into a closed session once a year and then absolutely get blindsided by, half a dozen issues that the elected body had of the way that I was performing for them. So my recommendation is be open, be honest, be candid, and be respectful. Does that help at all, Angela?
She was nodding.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. What's that? Yeah, sorry. I was taking notes.
Does anybody else have any questions?
Yes. Charles, I appreciate the time here today. And I think that's one thing I wanted to pick up on is you had mentioned about just building teams and building a kind of a relationship between council and staff and the town manager. Can you speak a little bit to, sort of coming up with a collective vision from council that kind of clearly defines, a group vision, as opposed to, each of us coming up with our own ideals and expectations for staff and the town manager?
Absolutely. I think that's one of the biggest challenges that a local government elected official has coming on board, particularly if they're new to that type of position. You've spent time as you're campaigning and running for office, hearing from people in the community. You've got all these ideas that you're excited about, and you want to implement them once you get on council. And then you realize, well, I've got to get X number of votes before I can make a significant change. I've got to actually build relationships and partnerships with my colleagues so I can get the things that I think are important for community done. So the other part of that, to your point, is how can you narrow that down? Because quite frankly, as a former manager, when I would ask elected officials what they want done now, the answer is everything. Of course you want everything done right now. Who doesn't? You want the new wastewater treatment plant upgrade. You want the new highway paved. You want the economic development project to come through. But that's just not possible. So I think it's smart for elected bodies to maybe sit down as a group once a year and think about a strategic plan for that 1 year, something that you can put together. That way you're setting expectations for yourself as an elected body, but you're also setting expectations for the town manager and the staff. And then you've collectively decided, this is what we're going to focus on this year. Yes, we're going to do all the day-to-day things that we have to do to make sure the community is running well. But maybe here's 3, 4, or 5 issues that we're really going to focus on. Whether it be infrastructure or business retention, public health, social justice, a lot of issues that local communities are really struggling with right now. So I think an annual retreat or a strategic planning session, whatever you want to call it, and that doesn't mean you've got to go out of town or do anything crazy. Just take time to have one meeting where you focus on only that, and that's your only business, and do some preparation before and after that. So.
Just a reminder to council that last year, Terry Small, who we got from VIG. She does some work with her other localities, did a semi-retreat for us, but we ended up doing so much of this council manager relationship stuff that we didn't get onto the planning, and that's what we hope to do in the next couple of months. It's a little bit more difficult with COVID because it's hard to do a planning retreat on Zoom. But if y'all liked, well, there's only 2 of y'all in here that had Terry last year. I can reach back out to her, or I don't know, Charles, if you guys have other people now, but people doing retreats by Zoom or waiting until after this craziness gets over, do you know?
You talking about local governments?
Yeah. What are they doing? Because we have so many, as you know, so many new people on council. We really need it, but other retreat is those interactive exercises and getting to know people and working it out in person. I don't know how effective they are on Zoom.
Yeah, and that's a struggle that everyone's dealing with right now. I mean, the luxury you have, and obviously I would always ask you to consult your town attorney on anything like this to make sure that you're meeting all the FOIA obligations and you're not meeting illegally. Some communities have done something where they've socially distanced. They've made sure that they were in a space that was large enough to accommodate the elected body. Obviously, you have to limit it to less than 10. Some communities have 5 council members, some have 7. Obviously, if you have 8 or 9 and you throw in the manager or the attorney, you're getting awful close to the limit. So I think that's the challenge. So if you can find yourself underneath and making sure you're meeting all the state laws and policies on meeting during a pandemic, and you can do it in a socially distanced way, and people are comfortable with that. Obviously, that's the other part too. Some people just may not be comfortable with that, and we've seen that as well. So you're absolutely right. Doing that in person and having some sort of ability to build relationships, again, particularly with so many of you that are either newly appointed or newly elected, I think that's going to be critical for you guys to come up with a policy or a strategic plan that you're all comfortable with and happy about it and excited about implementing. It also makes it easier for staff. So worst case scenario, I don't think there's anything wrong with at least attempting something virtually. That's better than doing nothing. You could start there, and then hopefully things will continue to improve for us here in the Commonwealth from a public health standpoint, and maybe you can follow up with something that's in person and socially distanced down the road. We also have a couple of relationships within the university. The Institute of Government partners with the Institute for Engagement and Negotiation, which is located in the architecture school at UVA. And we've developed a couple of courses that are really as much for elected officials as they are local government staff. And one of those is collaborative leadership. And we've developed that specifically for whether it be an elected body like yourselves, a regional entity, like for example, a Go Virginia board or something of that, or maybe the leadership team of locality, the city manager and department heads and things of that nature. So we've got some options within the Institute that we'd be happy to discuss with you if you'd like to consider those things further as part of what you guys do to build your relationship and to work on strategic planning. So.
And then can you touch just a bit, and I'm sorry I didn't give you any indication, but on speaking with one voice, I know last year in our retreat, we talked a lot about council members being able to have their own opinions and certainly having dialogue in a public meeting. Once a decision is made, really speaking with one voice out in the community and making sure we're all sharing the same information.
No, absolutely. And that's challenging because a lot of times as an elected official, you end up on the small end of the vote. And those are challenging things, especially if it's something that's, hotly contested in a community. Things like land use decisions, infrastructure, tax rates, utility rates. Those are really hard decisions. Particularly zoning and those types of issues have been some of the most contentious meetings I've been to in my career when you're telling someone what they can and can't do with property. So, from a manager standpoint, I always made sure that I gave the council equal information. Everyone knew everything that was going on in the background from a staff standpoint, and our recommendation on an issue. And then obviously once the council made a decision, the entire staff absolutely embrace that and use that as our policy moving forward, as long as it's legal and ethical. I will give that caveat. For elected officials, you can't really, you answer to the citizens of your community, and so you have to decide what the decorum level is for you guys as an elected body that you find to be acceptable. And I think there's something to be said and very important about having debate and discussion about an issue as you lead up to a vote, and having conversations in the community, outside of town hall. That's very important. But I will say, in my personal opinion and my professional experience, once the vote's been taken and you've decided as a majority of a council what you're going to do as a policy or if a plan, you're really just shooting yourself in the foot if you're going out and speaking divisively against each other. It erodes trust. It erodes trust in people understanding what the town's trying to accomplish. People do want to hear a collective voice and feel confident that the elected body and the leadership of the town is while they have maybe a debate on something, they can move forward from something. I've seen many relationships deteriorate, people who didn't talk to each other ever again over a vote at a council meeting. And that's not effective. That's not helpful for you guys when you've got to sit on that dais multiple times a month. Well, maybe not now, but when you do go back to actually having meetings together, that makes things really challenging, especially when you've got to build coalitions. It goes back to my point earlier when Bradford was asking about, you get on council and you want to do all these things. Sometimes, that person that voted against you is going to be with you the next time. So you have to remember that when you're trying to build a coalition to support something that you think is important for the community, or the people that elected you think is important for the community. So I agree, Angela, that collective voice is very important. I'm ardent supporter of good debate, but being respectful to one another, I think is very important. And I've seen a lot of unfortunate things come out of public meetings, and it doesn't do well for the town, because another part of this too is people are watching you. A great example of it I always like to use is economic development. If someone is looking at opening a business in your town, and they see that the council is divisive and is constantly arguing back and forth in public settings, the decorum's not great, things aren't happening, is that person going to invest in your community? Yeah, maybe they will, but I don't think it's a good look. So I think I was always very fortunate to work a majority of my career for elected bodies that tried to understand that and knew that there was definitely some fallout if there was a lack of decorum in public meetings.
I was taking notes. Does anybody else have any questions? Charles, I really appreciate your time this evening, and hopefully we got some good information out of that, and look forward to seeing you sometime in the future.
Absolutely. Angela knows how to get a hold of me. I'm happy to help you guys anytime I can. And I look forward to coming to visit you once it's safe for me to do so I can see your community and visit you all in person.
Thank you very much.
Can you send me your slides from tonight?
I absolutely will.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good night, council.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we adjourn this evening, I do want to, for those of you who have not met Maggie, she is on the call this evening. So she's waving at everybody. So she started last week. So welcome to you. And she's had a busy week since she's been here and been very well received. So welcome. And then we also have Chief Trout, who has joined us this evening. So thanks for your time this evening, both of you. So need a motion to adjourn this evening's meeting. Somebody's going to have to unmute.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Meeting adjourned. Thank you very much for everyone's time tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Good night.
Get easy.
Thanks, Krista.